We are depleting our savings dramatically. We take $10,000 a month out of savings, sell our stocks, whatever my financial advisor does. I don't actually even know because I don't want to know because it makes me ill to think about, because I had a good nest egg to buy a house at one point in life, and now it's paying for daycare.
What's a typical day in the Rossler home?
I'm usually the first one up and out of bed, usually with the cat, shower, make coffee, try and catch some news on the TV before these guys start waking up. I'll usually go in around 6:30, and then what you see now is generally the chaos that ensues.
Yeah? All right, pop down. Let's wash our hands. Or they got to put you down so they can wash hands, okay? Wait, Nathan, he's going to pass out. I need you to help here.
All right, okay.
Come here.
I need help.
$12 a week. She's stuck on you?
Yep.
Come here.
Okay.
Sorry, Marley girl. That's very helpful, thank you. Ready?
Yes.
All right, let's go.
Come on.
Not bye-bye, we're all going in together. Okay. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Oh, still here. Hello. So I pay about $5,000 a month for childcare for the 3 children, which is insane. Nathan makes $100,000 after taxes, that's $65,000, and rent is $5,000 a month. So we don't have that money.
It's really expensive to raise a child in America. It costs more to send your kid to this daycare than it does to go to college just 4 blocks away. Childcare costs are different from state to state, even county to county. Overall, the cost of childcare has roughly tripled since 1990, which is more than the overall rate of inflation. Today, it's a multi-billion-dollar business, and it feels like almost everyone is struggling to keep up.
You want me to look?
Whether you live in Kansas, whether you live in Missouri, whether you live in California or New York, the cost of care is often beyond that which families can afford.
It causes a lot of stress.
I've sacrificed certain bills being late because I had to pay childcare.
Except for public education, almost every form of social service, social policy have been privatized.
Childcare centers can't afford to provide it, and families can't afford to pay for it.
The money will run out in the next couple of months, and at that point I actually have absolutely no idea what we're going to do.
We are not investing in the well-being and the development of the brains of our children, and that's sinful.
The cost of childcare is generally paid for by a combination of the government, parents, and childcare providers. In other countries like Denmark and Sweden, the government foots most of the bill. In the US, the cost falls mostly on parents and providers. To try and make sense of how we got here, I called Sonia Michel, an expert on America's child care policy history.
A lot of other countries have different rationales for why they have childcare. Gender equity, preparing children for school, boosting the economy, whatever. The U.S., to a great extent, does not subscribe to those kinds of rationales.
The issue of childcare in America has been around since the beginning of America itself. Native Americans carried their babies in woven slings. Colonial women put them in standing stools to keep them from falling into fireplaces. And African American mothers sang white babies to sleep while their own children comforted themselves. In the 19th century, the answer to who looked after your children generally came down to how much money you had.
It was this ideal of maternal care and the woman in the home, the angel in the house. There were all these images that were used, what some historians call the cult of domesticity. And so the ideal was that women would stay home to take care of their kids. But that was an ideal that really only middle-class women were able to attain. Working-class women, even if they had a male breadwinner, the husband, the male, could not generate enough income to support the whole family. And so women had to work as well. And so then there was the dilemma of, what to do with the kids.
Since there was nowhere to bring the kids, they would sometimes join their parents at work, oftentimes in dangerous conditions at mines, cotton mills, factories, and farms.
There was not even mandatory school attendance until the late 19th century. So kids could work, and there was no legal impediment to that.
There was a mix of formal and informal day nurseries run as charities.
We've got something in this town that every American town will soon have to have. A day nursery where working mothers can leave their children to be cared for while they're on the job. Although some people call the children 8-hour orphans, they arrive at the nursery as early as 6 in the morning and don't leave until their parents get back from work.
It wasn't this kind of feminist notion that we're going to provide childcare so women can enter the labor force on an equal footing with men.
From there, widows' or mothers' pensions were born. A stipend was given to women who lost their male breadwinner because he was injured in a factory or died.
So this was just the opposite of childcare. Instead of supporting women so they could go into the labor force, the government said, no, we're going to support women so they could stay at home.
But when World War II came, the government started recruiting women to work in factories as the men went out to war.
On the production line, Rosie the Riveter steps in when the draftees step out.
American girls fill 105mm shells with the nonchalance of a tea party. TNT.
From 1940 to 1945, the total women in the workforce rose nearly 30%.
And they very brilliantly realized that if women had children, something had to be done for the children. So this was really the first and only time that the American government, at the federal level, said, okay, we have to support childcare.
Essentially, the U.S. was the closest it had ever been to having universal childcare. An amendment to the Lanham Act gave families access to childcare 6 days a week, including summers and holidays, and families only had to pay roughly $10 a day in today's dollars. But once the war ended and the men went back to work, government funding dried up, and a lot of centers closed. In 1965, the Johnson administration launched Project Head Start, a comprehensive child development program as part of the president's war on poverty.
A head start for poverty's children.
In 1971, President Nixon vetoed a child care plan, saying it would weaken the role of family.
Both of these women in Los Angeles are on welfare, aid to families with dependent children.
In the 80s, government funding fell again, with a public backlash against the idea of welfare for low-income women.
These are all programs President Reagan says he wants to cut or tighten.
We will tighten welfare.
I thought welfare was already tight.
Today, the government covers less of the child care burden than it did in the 40s. But that's not to say Uncle Sam is completely out of the picture. The Head Start program is still standing and provides roughly $9 billion in grants to community-based nonprofits, schools, and healthcare centers. Even so, parents across the income spectrum are struggling to balance their budgets with the cost of childcare.
Okay, I'll get more in 1 second.
There's this butterfly dress, or you have this shirt that has buggies on it.
So for years, I was very good at savings and always put money away every month, every week, every opportunity.
Are you trying to hold Jory's hand?
The money will run out in the next couple of months, and at that point, I actually have absolutely no idea what we're gonna do.
A 2011 census study found that on average, families were spending 7% of their income on childcare. The Department of Health and Human Services used that data to recommend people not spend more than that. But if you look at how things actually play out across the country today, there's not a single state where the cost of sending a toddler to a licensed childcare center averages out to actually meet that recommendation. For single parents, it's even worse, creeping up to 65% of their median income depending on where they live. HHS said it's considering updating its recommendation with a more nuanced approach. Those families who don't pay for childcare save money by either staying home or having family and friends step in to babysit.
Honestly, I thought I would have family to keep my son for me.
I talked with Naomi, a single mom in South Orange, New Jersey, about what it's been like to try and make ends meet while paying for childcare for her two youngest sons.
I really wasn't expecting to put my kids into childcare. Unfortunately, my mom passed away. So childcare had to become an option for me because there was no one else in the family to care for him. And I didn't think it would be so hard to find a place.
Childcare, to me, partially is amazing and wonderful, and I found the perfect situation for my family and for my children, for their development, and also it makes me physically ill because I have 3 children to the tune of $2,100 per child, and we don't bring in over $100,000 for a year, so we don't even cover the cost of what it is for childcare and half of our rent.
I wanted to see if money really could buy you peace of mind when it comes to childcare. So I went to the Manhattan office for Homefront Staffing. It's an agency that places nannies, butlers, and chauffeurs for high-income New Yorkers.
Top firm lawyers and investment bankers, it's still a struggle. I mean, I definitely think if you have more money that there are more options without a doubt available to you. It's still like the bottom line, what do you have left over after you pay for everything at the end of the month?
Childcare isn't just an issue to families' bottom line. That stress can pile up at the office, too.
If your kid gets sick, you may have to call out. You don't have no one to keep them, so you can't bring them to work with you. So you have to stay home and get docked that day for work.
Naomi currently works at a university, but she said in previous jobs, if she called out sick, she didn't get paid.
Even if they're paid, like I said, a good salary, and these are big corporations, they have lack of performance at work. They're stressed out. They're going to human resources saying, like, what can you do for me? Do you have backup childcare? My nanny called in sick. What do you do when your nanny calls in sick and you have a child?
I think across the board, childcare is very expensive. But of course, I feel in the suburbs area, these people are like big time executive directors and doctors, so they can afford to pay $5,000 a month for childcare.
Parents need to get their names on lists like before their child's even born, and it's a lottery to get in.
I applied when I was 3 months pregnant, and there was a wait list, which is shocking and bizarre, but we're in New York City, and I think that's actually pretty typical.
Today, there are 3 main types of childcare. Nonprofit, like programs run by the YMCA, for-profit, like Bright Horizons, and government-run, like Head Start or Pre-K. All of this doesn't even get into the market of private caregivers like nannies and au pairs. Most of the programs in the U.S. are privatized, and those centers serve a lot of kids.
The cost of care for childcare really is within the individuals who do the caring. The teachers and the nurturers and the caretakers for those young children, critically important individuals, are expensive. It's a very labor-driven industry.
Licensed childcare classrooms require a specific ratio of kids to teachers. In New York, it's 1 teacher for every 4 infants with a maximum group size of 8. As the kids get a little older, the class sizes get bigger. HHS has this tool that you can use to estimate the cost to run a childcare center in different states. After factoring in salary costs, benefits, and other non-personnel expenses, and revenues from subsidies and tuition, their theoretical childcare center came out with just $2,537 in net revenue. I talked to one childcare provider who said it's a good year if she just breaks even. I wanted to see one of these daycares in action. I found a place in New Jersey called Work and Play. It's kind of like a WeWork meets daycare. Parents can work on the ground floor and enroll their kids in the childcare center downstairs. And it's a different model than most centers that charge tuition. Here, parents pay $15 an hour for the times they do need. So if you just need care Mondays 9 to 1, you commit for a 3-month session and only pay for those set times.
As a business owner, I can see why it's so expensive. You know, once you're paying a salary, there's also payroll costs on top of that. And then there's, the facility costs, the heat, the electricity, the Wi-Fi, everything that you need. You also want to pay your teachers well because, it's important. They're just people trying to make their life work as well.
The median pay for childcare workers in the U.S. in 2018 was $23,000 a year, or $11.17 an hour. That's slightly less than animal caretakers like pet sitters and groomers.
Childcare providers really feel that they cannot survive on the low salaries and the long hours, so you will see a high turnover rate.
I talked with a lot of families who needed childcare, and most of their needs came down to 3 main things: safety, quality, and affordability.
It's hard to find a place with all 3 of them. It's like they may have 2, but you don't know about the 3rd one. Or they could take the toddler, but they can't take the infant. Or they could take the infant, and there's no room for the toddler.
It's not just urban centers that are feeling the squeeze. The demand for childcare is way higher than the supply all across the country. More than half of Americans live in what's called a childcare desert.
We did a study a couple of years ago, and we found there was space for only 27% of those children likely to need care. That's a really low number where we don't know where the rest of those children are being cared for. So it's a huge concern for us.
Some of those families who can't get licensed care may turn to unlicensed centers that are typically cheaper but aren't always safe. In some cases, it's life or death.
Most parents are doing a pretty good job. They love their kids, the kids love them. They've got enough relatives and friends to help carry some of the ball. But the ones who don't, the isolated ones, the ones with mental health problems, the ones with physical health problems, those kids are just going down the drain.
Barbara Bowman has been working in childcare since the 50s. She led early childhood education at Chicago Public Schools for 8 years and spent some time consulting the U.S. Secretary of Education in 2008. I asked her what she saw as the biggest hurdle to getting things done in Washington.
Legislators. You would suggest something and it wouldn't get passed around to the legislators who were known for being supportive of early childhood, and it would come back marked up. And I'd say, who marked it up? Well, somebody in a senator's office marked it up.
Federal child care funding in the U.S. has been in this perpetual ebb and flow in response to cultural values. Today, we're facing record numbers of women in the workforce. And for many Americans, the prospect of having a child means you have to decide whether or not it's worth it to go back to work.
If you don't have access to the high quality care, you may see, women having to stay home and take care of their children because they have no other options.
Some clients have given up their jobs because it doesn't make sense for them to work anymore because all the money they're paying is going to their child care.
In Estonia, mothers are entitled to more than 2.5 years of paid leave. But even in one of the most progressive countries for parental leave, there's still a pretty big gender disparity. Fathers in Estonia are only entitled to 2 weeks. Meanwhile, the US is the only developed country where neither mothers or fathers are entitled to any paid parental leave. That absence of federal legislation has resulted in a lack of access for working parents. In 2017, only 15% of American workers had access to paid family leave. There are some states that have taken paid leave into their own hands. As of May 2019, at least 5 states had their own paid family leave laws. Of course, there are federal subsidies for some families who can't afford childcare, but there are a lot of people who qualify but don't actually get the vouchers. That's in part because some parents just don't apply, either because they don't know about them or find the application process too daunting.
The subsidy part is very tedious. It's like they want your life. When I say your life, like you have to bring all your documents, your letter verifying that you work, how many hours you work, how many days a week you work, birth certificate, their social, my birth certificate, my driver's license or passport. And then it goes by family household income. For me, I'll be a family of 4. They'll say, okay, you can't make more than $42,000 for the year. So once they do their calculations, if you over by a penny, you don't qualify.
In 2018, President Trump added an additional $5.8 billion in discretionary spending over 2 years to the Child Care and Development Block Grant. You can also write off up to $3,000 in child care expenses from your taxes for 1 child, up to $6,000 for 2 or more. The benefit you get from that write-off depends on your income. Altogether, Americans claimed $3.6 billion in child care credit in tax year 2016. Compared to some other tax credits that cost more than $100 billion a year, the tax break for childcare is pretty minimal.
I mean, there's a child care tax dependent credit you get, it covers nothing. It's like maybe $2,000 to $3,000 a year. There needs to be something that either you get a credit for having a caregiver in your home, much more than $3,000, that you can write off on your tax return, or the corporation should have other options when they're hiring employees.
So money can buy you more options, but it seems like parents all across the income spectrum are stressed about the cost of childcare, and politicians in Washington are starting to take notice.
That's why I'm proposing a big structural change. Universal, high-quality child care and early education for our littlest ones.
It is un-American. We should be the #1 nation for investing in children, investing in child well-being.
The costs of raising a family.
Ivanka Trump has pushed the issue in the White House.
It is a priority of this administration, and it is a legislative priority to ensure that American families can thrive.
President Trump included a measure in the 2020 budget proposal that would give new parents at least 6 weeks paid leave. And Democrats have put forward their own paid leave proposal with the Family Act. Republican Senators Marco Rubio and Mitt Romney have put forward a paid family leave bill. It would let parents pull up to 3 months of their Social Security benefits to help cover leave after having a child. But as of early May 2019, none of those proposals have made it through Congress. And while these proposals would help families with newborns, they don't change much about the struggles of paying for childcare for toddlers before they go to kindergarten. One Democratic proposal would try and address this by upping the child tax credit to $3,600 a year for families with young children. That would be spread out over $300 a month. And on the heels of his universal pre-K, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio is rolling out 3K for all, an effort to give 3-year-olds in low-income neighborhoods access to free, all-day early childhood education. The program is currently up and running in 12 districts across New York. On a smaller scale, Jamie's talking with companies to see how they can make their corporate culture better for parents.
There's definitely still a disconnect, I would say, between like top management and human resources and just making it a priority.
There's no one solution. It's going to have to be a combination of solutions to help address this issue.
Some people are tackling it by adapting to the changing workforce.
A lot of times the jobs that low-wage workers have are on different hours that don't match what the child care centers have. So they're not typical 9-to-5 jobs. So that puts an additional challenge on finding available child care.
There are a whole lot more independent contractors now than there were 10 years ago, and statistics show that that number is just going to be going up. They might not need 5 days a week of 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. childcare anymore.
She won't let me pull her socks out.
Marlon and Jordy were just holding hands in the stroller.
Stop it. Oh, let's go see them. Come on, kiddo. There's nothing cheap or affordable. You do what you have to do for your children, and you want them to have the best possible early childhood experience and entire life experience. So once you're a parent, doesn't matter what you have, what you make, what you do, it's all for them, and that's where we are.